Hello, I'm Daniela, and welcome to Prompt 2 in the Stitch the Season Fabric Book Workshop. All previous videos and the companion videos will be linked below in case you want to go back and refresh, or maybe you missed one. Today's prompt is ribbon collage. Now, Christmas ribbon is plentiful, beautiful, and it has so many uses. Most of us have some type of ribbon around, and even if you don't have Christmas ribbon, you can use fabric as well. You can either tear it or cut it into ribbon pieces. You want to create a collage. I'll show you how I make mine, just with vertical strips of ribbon, but you can vary yours and make it however you like. It's a fun technique. We'll also make a little ribbon cluster to go with our collage. I have a companion video for that, and I'll link that below as well. So let's get started right away.
So here's the finished first prompt that I did. I have the back of the page. Today I'm working on the next prompt, and I'm going in order. You don't have to go in page order or anything, but I'm showing you how I'm going to do it. So this is another of those pages that we cut out, and the finished intention is going to be back to back like this. So I'm going to work on this side today. So I'll put aside my first prompt, and now we're to work on this half. Now I folded in half just so that I'm keeping in mind the finished space that I'm working with. I also have two little quilt clips here just to hold down the pieces so they stay flat. I could always add a stitch or even a little glue stick, but I kind of like these clips. They're easy enough to move around and they give some weight to my fabric. So since today's prompt is a ribbon collage, I have my background piece of fabric here, and again it's a little big, so I'll cut it down. I can decide if I want the raw edges or not, and I'm just going to use this as kind of a base for my collage. So I'll trim it down just so I get the final size correct that I want. So now I have my finished piece. My cut was a little wonky, but that's okay, it's not going to show. It's really just for me to have a backing piece. So I'll open up my page here, and now I know this is what I'm going to work on. I'm going to add just a couple pins to hold this in place. Now this step is not necessary to have this fabric piece here. I could sew directly onto the page. I like to have this fabric piece. I just think it gives the page a little weight. And this way, if anything peeks out from my collage, pretty much it's this sheet of fabric. So I like that. The next step is where the fun begins, and that's where I choose the ribbons. So let me pull all my ribbons out and see what I have to work with. So here's a bunch of ribbon. This is not all my Christmas ribbon, but this is the ribbon that I kind of whittled down, the color scheme and the ribbon I want to use in today's project. Now this is a two-step project. We're making the fabric collage onto the page, and then we're making a ribbon cluster that we're going to pin to the page. You can also stitch it to the page if you don't have pins. So right now I have a lot of ribbon. I purposely chose thicker ribbon, really thick ribbon, and then really thin ribbon because I want all these different textures and appearances. And I've tried to narrow down the colors. In this case, it's just off-white, red, and green, and there's a little bit of gold accents, which was a little unexpected bonus. So now I want to whittle it down further. I love this Christmas ribbon that has the text on it, but the finish is kind of dull compared to the other finishes, and I really like that little hint of that gold. So I'll set this one aside for now. I might use it in my cluster, but I'm not going to use it in my collage. I really like this ribbon with the little kitty cats. My daughters are big cat ladies, so this always reminds me of them. And I really think this is beautiful, this little painted Christmas tree. And I do like the variation of the plain, the white here with a little bit of lace. So I like these other ribbons. I think I'll work on those later. They all add a little texture, a little color, so that will be something I'll come back to. So I'll set these aside now and just work on my collage. So back to my page here, I want to just create the collage. Now I could cut this up and make a grid. I'm just going to cut it up and make just straight lines of this beautiful print here. So I'll cut out my ribbon, and I always make it a little longer than I need. I can use the leftover scraps in another way as well. So now I have the basis for my collage. It's very simple. Now, two of these ribbons, this and this, are wired. In this particular instance, I don't want to use that wire, and it's not a problem. I just cinch the edges, push up that wire, and then with my other hand, I just grab it and remove it, just slide it out. This just takes away a little bit of that heft and the weight, and it makes the ribbon stitch down nicely. So now the next step is to stitch down the ribbon. Now I can either stitch it down or I can use my sewing machine and stitch it together. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my sewing machine out, stitch it together so that it becomes one piece of fabric, and then I can play around with exactly where I want it and what other additions I have to make. So I've stitched it down. I missed a little bit over here with my stitching, but that's okay. It's holding it in place. And now it's covering pretty well all of that area here. There's a little bit of that background peeking out, so I have room to add another little piece of ribbon. So now I want to figure out which one I want to add. So far it's coming out really well, and I think I want to decide if I want this red ribbon or this green ribbon here. I think I'm going to go with the red ribbon. I think it balances out that. So I'll get this in order here. It also pulls in a little more gold. So now I'll just remove these pins for the time being. And I'll remove these clips. And now I want to stitch down my piece. I can bring it back to the sewing machine or stitch it by hand. And I'll add this piece as well. Now, before I stitch it, I want to trim it to make sure it's the right size. If I want the nice neat edges, I'll just trim it and tuck it under. And I think that's what I'll do. So I'll just press the edges, starting up top here, pin it in place, and then stitch it down. And I think I am going to go back to my machine and just top stitch it down around the edges. And then I'll come back in and add some trim. I like to stitch it down first and then tuck my ends as I go. So I've stitched everything to my page. And when it's completely done, that will be the page. So you can see the back. I stitched with my machine to hold down the collage. I hand stitched through this trim because it was a little heavy. And now I think I want to add just one more piece here that I'll hand stitch in place. Just another layer of trim to add interest to that collage. So I'll hand stitch this down, and then we'll work on the Christmas ribbon cluster to add to our piece. So here I've completed stitching this down. I think it makes it just pop a little bit more. There's a lot of sparkle. I'm not sure if the camera picks it up. Not glitter per se, although there might be some glitter here. I think it's metallic thread, but it's just a nice little touch. And there's the stitches on the back. So now I want to make a little dangle. So I love the page, but I think it needs something else, something with movement. So that's why I'm going to make that little ribbon cluster. So to do that, I always start with a pin. I'm using a garment pin. It's just a little bulb here with a little safety pin closure, so nobody gets poked. You can also use a safety pin, and if you didn't have pins or you didn't want to use pins because this was for children or anything, you could just stitch the cluster to a point on your piece and it would still have that movement. But I'm going to use this pin, so I'll set this aside for now. I have a more in-depth video on creating these ribbon clusters. Again, you'll just start with what ribbon you have or you like, or lace, whatever works for you. I'm sticking with the colors from my design, and I always like incorporating lace as well. You can decide the length of the cluster. It can be the length of the page, it can be shorter. It's really up to you. I like just having a little cluster of ribbons, the color, the textures that goes together. So I have this piece of lace, and I'll just put everything together for now and then work on the sizing later. I like to have my clusters pretty full, not so full that they're going to disrupt the book, but full enough that you can see it ahead of time and you're kind of curious what's going on that page. So I'll just cut some ribbon, and throughout my project I save additional ribbon, that the little leftovers for my work, because I'll use those in additional designs later in the season. So I have the beginning here. I usually start with my thickest ribbon as the base, the background of this. So just really quickly putting it in order I have my thickest to my thinnest here, and I can decide how I want it to go. Now I usually make these no stitch. If the ribbon is particularly fussy, as I call it, it's really not fussy, it's more like I'm the fussy one, I might start it with a stitch. So I'll take some thread, fold over my ribbon, or even maybe double fold it so that I don't have an unruly end, and just make a few little stitches. Put my needle from inside and just stitch it to hold it closed. Doesn't have to be particularly neat with the stitching because it's all going to be covered up. But I like just having it as a starting point together like that. And I'll knot this on the back. Now from here I just play around. I'll start with the length, maybe approximately that length, maybe 4 inches or so. And I do like to make tails on my ribbon, either tails or angles, but I'll start with a tail right now, and I'll save this little piece of ribbon. Come back to my lace. I think I'll just cut the lace to a point. Again, that's just a little bit of added interest. So that will be my next layer. Then I have this red. I can put it over the lace, or maybe I'll put it under the lace. Trim the edge. Make my tails by folding it in half and going out towards the bottom. And I think I just want to create this a little bit shorter than my first piece of ribbon. And this way I get to see all the beautiful ribbons here. And then I'll take this piece. Again, I'll play around with that. I'll try and make little tails on this one. This is a beautiful felt ribbon. And I love those little stitches, simple top stitching. And then I have this piece. I'll just double that up. I think I'll knot the end on each end. Gives a little bit of texture, and then I can trim it down. So there's so many variations you can do. You can string beads if you wanted. I like to keep it fairly simple with just different types of trims and ribbon. You can even use fabric if you don't have ribbon, or you don't have the ribbon in the right color or texture. So that's coming out really nice. Now I would just string this all through my pin. The other thing to consider is if you want a little bead or charm. I have a leftover gold bead from taking apart the poinsettia, but it's way too big and it doesn't fit. And I have another little gold bead, but because of the way the garment pin works, that doesn't really fit either. I can't do both. So I went back to my stash to find something gold. And wouldn't you know it, I found these beautiful little jingle bells. And I don't know if these are going to fit either. Oh, they do. So that's great. So I'll just string a few on. It adds a little sound. And I do love that. And now I'll just string all my pieces on. So I'll take this red ribbon and get it ready just to knot it on. Create that little knot. And I can just tighten it up on my pin. That holds everything up so I can go through here as well and poke my pin through. And now I have a little cluster here. Take my page, decide where I want to put the cluster on the page, and just poke it through. I'm sure I'll move it in the future when I sew up my book. But for now, I've got this cute little cluster. I'll definitely move it. I don't want to hide those cats. But that's the second prompt in the series, ribbon collage. You can use fabric as well, or you can even draw your own designs, or you can stitch it entirely. And then a little Christmas ribbon cluster. I think that's beautiful.
So that's prompt 2 in the Stitch the Season workshop. I think it's coming along beautifully. Be sure to check out our Facebook group where you can post your work, your progress on your book. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Please consider becoming a paid member of my channel as well. Thanks for joining me today.